Somebody hiding a cat.
Okay, so we're recording. Okay, so you can plug in, Aiko.
Where's the thing? Oh, this. Never mind.
So just a few slides to review. Um, this we did Iranian history. We started at the beginning with Cyrus the Great, buried in this tomb. And the last Shah that Khomeini threw out honored Cyrus in 1971 with a 2,500 year celebration. So we're celebrating our 250th celebration since the Declaration of Independence. Well, he claimed a 10 times longer period of time. The biblical hero who freed the Jews from their captivity in Babylonia. And he was very unpopular when he threw that big party because he had it catered by maxims of Paris. You can imagine all the money that was spent. All this is spelled out in King of Kings, a book by Scott Anderson. Very well done. It gives you a look into the whole Iranian revolution and what happened to the last Pahlavi Shah. There were some other peoples that went to that celebration for, for the Shah. And see if you can guess who they are. Here's one. We were there 3 months, 3 months after uh, 3 months after the celebration. And you can see the tents were still up for the dignitaries from around the world. And this is Persepolis, constructed by Cyrus the Great. Okay, so guess who this is? I'll tell you, it's not me. So it's not me, but it's somebody our study group knows well. Any guesses?
Make it bigger. Can't see.
Here it is. Here's the answer. Our own Bob Oxenberg.
Oh, wow.
Bob's in one of our squares today. So, and he's not denying it. So there you are.
It was also 1972, but probably 2 or 3 months after you were in that neighborhood.
Oh man, imagine that.
It was a very hot
Oh,
day.
wow.
Yeah, we were there in February. Not so hot. And in fact, we'd come from Tehran where it was snowing. But you get down south to Persepolis, and it's a much milder climate. Okay, so I won't go over all this. He freed the Jews. After we jump ahead to turn of the millennia, the Sasanians in the beginning in the year 224. This is their kingdom. They were big on Zoroastrianism, you'll remember. And then the big explosion of Islam out of the Arab peninsula, Mecca. and very rapidly conquered all this territory. It was unbelievable, all including where we're going, Spain. And what happened to the Persians during this explosion? You can see they're conquered. Well, their deal was they took over the bureaucracy in Baghdad, and they finessed all the ethnic and theological differences that they may have had with the Arabs for almost 800 years. And we'll pick up the story again with the Safavids in 1400. But all this time, the Persians were under the thumb of either the Arabs or the Turks or the Mongols. So they had a rough 800 years. But they made do by serving as the bureaucrats for whoever the soldiers were that were in charge. The warlords that were in charge will run your kingdom for you. And so they achieved a lot in science and math, anatomy, ethics, philosophy. And then they moved on to Spain and Cordoba, where they set up a seat of learning that was visited by Europeans, and including scholars from Italy, who went back after studying the classic texts that had been preserved in Cordoba and went back to Italy and started something called the Renaissance. I showed this slide, which I kind of, how could this be accurate? But it gives you a gestalt of there was this era of 700, 800 years where it was Muslims who were advancing civilization. And so now we get into the decay of the Abbasids. They were the dynasty that ran their enterprise out of Baghdad. And they started getting run over by Turks. So here you see there's a Turkish entity, Sunni, that controlled the area of Persia. And here's the Abbasid Caliphate kind of getting pushed aside. I won't spend any time. Then come the Mongols. They destroy Baghdad, and they set up, and for 100, maybe 150 years, a little bit longer in Russia, they set up khanates and hordes and controlled all this territory. And so Persia has to live in that environment. And then, if that's not enough, another wave of Turks come, led by Tamerlane, who overruns Baghdad completely. So the Abbasids are gone. They were actually taken out by the Mongols. And then their kingdom, which they call the Timurid Empire, included Persia and Iran. So they're under the thumb of all these entities. And then, if that weren't enough, in come another wave of Turks, the Seljuks, and them and some of their descendants are eventually going to conquer Byzantium and take over present-day Turkey. The Ottoman Sultan, which is the last wave of Turks, decided to demote the caliph and that was it. The Persians finally had had enough, and they rebelled against all of the combination of these Turks, and rebelled in the name of the Shia branch of Islam. Now, some of us were confused, and maybe that's my fault. Last week, I never got to this slide to explain the biggest difference between Shia and Sunni. So I'm going to look at Muhammad's family tree, which combines the leaders of Islam after he died, and try to explain the difference between Sunni and Shia. First of all, the basics. Muhammad's first wife is Khadija, who was a very rich Arab woman in Mecca. And Muhammad worked for, yeah, she was a widow. And Muhammad worked for her as a caravan driver, taking goods. She was in the trade business, and he would drive goods from Mecca up to Damascus, back and forth. They had a daughter, Fatima. She died, and Muhammad takes on a second wife, Aisha. Her father is a guy named Abu Bakr, who is one of Muhammad's trusted deputies. And when Muhammad dies, it's perfectly logical that Abu Bakr takes over for him. That's not so much a problem. Everybody that has consensus about Abu Bakr. But is he? What about the next one? That's where the problem comes. One other wrinkle in this is Muhammad has an uncle, and this uncle has a son, Ali, which makes Ali Muhammad's cousin, and Ali marries Fatima. All right? So it's all very simple. You've got the main players. Now, what happens when Abu Bakr dies? Then there's a big disagreement. But consensus, they meet again and they say, look, let's do Umar. He's a pretty good guy, but not everybody agrees. When there's a meeting, there's going to be some dissenters. So he's assassinated. And then they have another meeting and select somebody else, but they're dissenters, and he's assassinated. Finally, everybody agrees, let's try Ali, who is the cousin of Muhammad, but also the son-in-law of Muhammad. So Ali's got a lot of credentials, and you'd think the assassinations would stop, but no, he's assassinated. And his son, Muhammad's grandson, Hussein, claims the caliph, to be the caliphate. So just to review, Abu Bakr was acceptable by all. He was also family in-law, no problem, and he was the first caliph. But after Abu Bakr dies, then what? And they decide, they select somebody by committee, but there's no real legitimacy, and then comes all these assassination. So 25 years after Muhammad's death, his son-in-law finally becomes caliph. So everything's back in the family and hunky-dory. But Ali feuds with the governor of Syria, this guy, Muawiyah. And so Ali gets assassinated. Now what? And this is where Hussein steps up, but people don't agree that Hussein has all the connections and credentials that Ali has. So there's a big battle, and the forces that are behind Ali are called Shia. Okay, this is the split of Sunni and Shia. And so Muhammad's grandson, Hussein, loses in the big battles in Karbala. And we're familiar with that name from our invasion of Iraq. We learned that there are a lot of Shiites in eastern Iraq. And Hussein was martyred and given a high rank in the Shia hierarchy, romanticized. So after Ali's assassination, his rival in Syria, Muawiyah, founded the Umayyad dynasty. So you've heard of that, and they made it all the way to Spain. And so now it's a dynasty. So there's not going to be any more meetings and trying to form a consensus. So there's, I think everybody comes, after all these assassinations, to the conclusion that to have legitimacy, you've got to have some kind of genetic connection. So here's a nice summary table. It's too detailed, but Shia are in the minority, only 10% of Muslims. They have the same holy cities, except they've added a couple in Iraq, Karbala, for the Shia. They celebrate the same major holidays. So they celebrate the sacrifice, the festival of sacrifice. And in the Jewish Judeo-Christian tradition, that's when Isaac is going to sacrifice, when Abraham's going to sacrifice Isaac. But in the Muslim tradition, Abraham is not going to sacrifice Sarah's son, Isaac, his wife. He is going to sacrifice Hagar's son, Ishmael. And who's Hagar? She's the servant to Sarah. So when we were in a Muslim country, when they were celebrating this festival of sacrifice, Abraham's sacrifice, but found ourselves hearing the story of Ishmael, not the story of Isaac. The other coda to this is in Muslim legend, Abraham, Hagar, and Ishmael go and live in Mecca, whereas in Judeo-Christian lore, Abraham goes to Israel and sets up a dynasty there. So all very interesting, I think. Jerusalem is a holy city for both Jews and Christians. Um, uh, why would Jerusalem be a holy city? Muhammad never went to Jerusalem. And it's funny, he was a caravan driver, so he went within a short distance of Jerusalem with his day job, but he only went there in a dream, a night dream. And there he encountered, in a dream, the earlier prophets in the Jewish tradition, and including Jesus. And he climbs up a ladder, taking off from a rock under the dome of the rock in Jerusalem, which is why Jerusalem is a holy city for Muslims. So, summary, leadership initially was chosen by the community. Abu Bakr was totally legitimate. The Shia position was things weren't made right until Ali succeeded to the caliphate. And so you have the caliph is more a political leader. The imam in the Shia hierarchy is divinely inspired to provide leadership. And those are the main difference. In Sunni, the teachings and sayings are at the University of Cairo, being kept by the ulama, which is a word for, I guess, like imams in Sunni, whereas in current times, the Shia center is Qom in Iran, the equivalent of the Vatican. And the Ayatollah, the head Ayatollah, they are divinely inspired to make judgments and pass down rulings. I'm going to save this. This is Toby's Green. She's not here today. Her first name is Shia, but I'm going to save this for a time when she's here. So, what do they agree on? Allah, the Quran, and the five pillars. It's only on succession and the passage of power that there's a disagreement. And here are the five pillars: faith through study, prayer, fasting at Ramadan, giving to the poor, and they're pretty good about that. Maybe better than some of us. And to make at least one pilgrimage in a lifetime to Mecca. Those are the five pillars. So flash forward now, we're talking about Iran. We've seen there's been an awful lot of chaos with Mongols, Turks, causing all kinds of disruptions. And three Muslim powers emerge from all this. The Safavids in Persia is one. The Ottomans in Turkey is the second one. And the Mughals in India and Afghanistan is the other. And who are the Mughals? They're just a combination of Mongols and Turks who merged together to form Mughals. And they're called the gunpowder empires because they all adopt gunpowder as ways of consolidating power. So here are these three gunpowder Islamic empires that emerge around the 1500s. And the Safavids are right here. And you see that they extend up into the Caucasus. So what's the Caucasus? It's that area of land between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And it changes hands back and forth between the Ottomans and the Safavids. You can see the Ottomans, they got all the way up to the gates of Vienna. So they controlled Hungary. They certainly controlled a lot of Ukraine and parts of Russia. And as we said earlier, they had lost Spain to Ferdinand and Isabella. All right. A long rivalry in the Caucasus. The Safavids and the Ottomans fight it out there. The Safavids lose quite a bit, but they survive. And the Safavid dynasty had been started by Ismail the First, and he settled the whole dispute about the successors to Ali by saying, I am the reincarnation of Ali himself. He doesn't bother to go and try to prove his lineage. He just says, I'm Ali. Anybody want to challenge that? And he declares that the brand of Shia is the 12er Shias. I'm not going to show that confusing slide again. And according to Shia, he was therefore divine. And this was a turning point in Iranian history. The establishment of a legitimacy for centralized power. And Iran is going to evolve and reshape the Middle East as it's doing right now. Right now. So where did Ishmael come from? He came from Baku, which is right on the Caspian Sea. Oil-rich territory, currently Azerbaijan. And a lot of the people up here are Turks. They're Azeris. And the Ayatollah that just got murdered is in fact Azeri. He's not Persian. I'll get to that in just a second. So, you know, what is this? The divine inspiration and Shia versus Sunni. And a lot of it, when you look at the politics of it, it's just warlords going at each other and trying to justify who they are. And so they come up with some sort of rationale why they should have power. And I've seen this in Northern Ireland, where the fight really is between Celts and Anglo-Saxons. And Catholicism and Protestantism, the actual beliefs have very little to do with the splits. They were just jerseys in Northern Ireland. I think a lot of that's what's going on with Shia versus Sunni in the Middle East. So Ishmael, he imports scholars from as far away as Lebanon and Iraq and builds a center of learning in Qom, which is still exists and probably had something to do with the selection of the new Ayatollah. Um, and it's not just theology, it's law, the legal system. Um, and so this is where Qom is, south of Tehran, the Iranian version of the Vatican. Um, and Ishmael, so who was he? What was his ethnicity? Well, interestingly, his uh, grandfathers were Kurdish, and a grandmother was Christian. Um, so he is an interesting mix. And so, in addition to Kurds, there's a little bit of Sufi belief in his grandparents. Um, so this is Ishmael himself, mixed background. Um, and then, as I said, Khamenei, his father was a Zeri who immigrated to Mashhad. Um, and the Azeris are very closely related to the Turks in language and culture. And this is Khamenei as a youth. The Khamenei was often used as an example of how well Azeris are integrated into Iran, and they do a very good job of assimilation. And relatively little ethnic tension. Sure, there's some. And there was some talk of using the Kurds as a wedge to try to disrupt Iranian society, but it took Trump a day to realize that was a dumb idea. So, and this is Khamenei's son, it just succeeded him. And now we can understand why Khamenei's son was the favorite to succeed him. When you look at the Shia theory of succession and how should power be passed. Yeah, Psycho.
I just read also he succeeded his father, but he's even more conservative than his father,
Yeah,
which is a problem
yeah.
for us.
Yep. No, they used this choice to broadcast what their stance is, and their stance is one of defiance. Defiance. So this, I talked about the Turkish influence, and there is a band of Turkish civilization that goes all starting from Turkey, and of course, at one point the Ottomans were in Europe, all the way across to Xinjiang in China. Um, and we had friends who visited Xinjiang who had also learned a little bit of Turkish, and he could understand what was being spoken in Xinjiang.
Wow.
So it's a real cultural connection across this whole band. Um, and so Ishmael interrupted the Sunni aspect, which most of that band is, and inserted for the first time Shia. And remember, this is the first time in 8 centuries that Iran was unified under a native ruler. that for 800 years they had been under the thumb of outsiders. Even then, Ishmael was squeezed by the Ottomans, particularly in the Caucasus, as we've said, and the Uzbeks, another Turkic tribe. Um, so the Shia and the Twelver, and this is simplified. This is all Iran is concerned. We can move on. Um, Another great ruler in that dynasty was Shah Abbas the First, and he reorganized the military, reduced tribal power, so made it even more centralized. His soldiers were slaves that had been taken, and they eventually formed a class called the Mamluks, who started their own dynasty that ruled Egypt for a couple of hundred years. Um, he promoted trade with Europe. And what did Iran have to trade? They had big horses to trade. And so there's something called the Tea Horse Trail. I'll show you in just a second. China was interested in big horses. And so they were also in the silk trade, Abbas the Great. And part of the Silk Road, developed trade relations as far away as England and the Dutch. And here is this horse tea horse trail. So this is, you could consider it a southern branch of the Silk Road, but it's not a road. It's more a footpath, right? Because they're really going through rough terrain, as opposed to the northern Silk Road, which is a lot of it in plains. This is in mountains and all going to Tibet. Esfahan was his capital, and I had a patient from Esfahan who said that Esfahan was really a Jewish city, which I thought was fascinating. So Abbas the Great realized that if he was going to do trade, he needed some experts. And so I thought that was interesting. We also went to Esfahan and saw these beautiful domes. And Safavid Iran during Abbas the Great was known for the carpets, the tile work, the architecture, miniature painting. Couple of shots from there. The blue tile, inset marble, fascinating stuff. So at its peak, they extended across into Anatolia, north into the Caucasus, and east into Pakistan and Afghanistan, pretty much controlling Afghanistan. So the Safavids had a far reach. The Ottomans were right next door, and the Safavids held their own for a long time. But then decline starts. After a while, dynasties get weak, more corruption, and outsiders invade, in this case, Afghan invaders and stagnation. So Afghan warlords are at it again. Pakistan and Afghanistan are fighting. Some of that's religious, but a lot of it is a border that was drawn by Brits before they left, without much concern about Pashtuns, and Pashtuns bridge that border. And so there are Pashtuns on both sides. And like we talked about last week when we were talking about Sunni land in between Iran and Syria, there should be a Pashtun land, and they should be have some autonomy. And the same for the Kurds. It's even worse. They're in 3 different countries. So all 3 of these empires started declining after about 400 years. And with this decay, you had a series of warlords and secular dynasties. So not much talk about Shiism. So there's a big religious pause for 200 years. And the Qajar dynasty is a weak secular dynasty, fragmented tribal alliances, very poor at collecting taxes and poor administrators. And as if that weren't enough, there was some outsiders that started playing around. The great game. So the British lion and the Russian bear, they're both going to, as we'll see, kind of try to manipulate events within Iran. And so Iran winds up losing their influence in the Caucasus, and they have to retreat from Azerbaijan area. So the people, though, even though the Iranians retreated, the people in these areas retained their Shia religions. And so the dark green there, and we know that eastern Iraq is Shia. When we invaded, the country was 60% Shia and 30% Sunni. A little bit of Shiism here in Lebanon and in Syria. That's Hezbollah territory. And there's some Shia in Yemen. They're the ones that are firing rockets on ships going through the Red Sea. So another weak Shah, and Britain is all of a sudden, particularly after World War I, interested in oil. They know that they almost ran out of fuel for their ships, and they're really interested in oil, as is America. And so we're kind of competing with the Brits in Saudi Arabia. And we won, interestingly, because of American missionaries to Saudi Arabia. But so the British are looking for concessions. They're tobacco and banking and concessions as well. And so they're playing off of this weak Shah and building up their influence. But finally, there are some reformers in Iran, and they say enough is enough. We want a constitution. And they have sway for 6 years. It's at the barrel of a gun, granted, but they they do start a parliament, and it's the first of its kind in the Islamic world. And it changes really the history of Persia. Even now, they have a parliament. And we have a friend who's a scholar who up until 10 years ago, he said it was a very lively parliament. He can understand Persian, and he would listen in on the weekly meeting of the Parliament, just like we are able to listen to the British House of Commons debate and find it entertaining. Well, he did the same thing up until 10 years ago. Um, and I say first in the Islamic world, this is earlier than the Young Turks who and their revolution in Turkey under Ataturk in 1908. And it's at this time that the press takes off. There are active newspapers across Turkey and Iran. I don't know about the other states. And this is their parliament, as it met in 1910. And this is a group of those revolutionaries. One of them's a doctor with a syringe, not sure what's going on there. But it ended in 1911. And why? 12,000 Russian troops came to the aid of the Shah and said, we'll help you in this experiment. They didn't want anything. The Tsars were dealing with their own radicals, and they didn't want a successful revolt on their southern border. So they helped the Shah in that flirtation with government by consent. Yeah. Meanwhile, Iran's in bad shape, but not as in bad a shape as the Ottomans. The Ottomans collapse spectacularly, becoming the sick man of Europe. And arguably, that loss of power and the vacuum created, particularly in this Muslim country of Bosnia in the Balkans, was one of the things that led to World War I, which changed the course of human history. And why were they sick? Their military wouldn't modernize. Their religion was suspicious of science and even resisted the printing press. So inertia and didn't collect taxes, everything fell apart. So here's what happened. Here's the Ottoman Empire. And Bosnia was a Muslim state, and all of a sudden, a Slavic state, Serbia, gets their independence, driving a wedge between Ottomans and Bosnia. And the Habsburgs and Austro-Hungary and Vienna say, we'd like a part of Bosnia. So let's send Archduke Ferdinand down there to visit Sarajevo. And he goes down to Sarajevo and he's assassinated by a Serb. And then World War I. So how does this relate to modern day Iran? In 1921, there's an army coup, but 4 years later, a strong man, Reza Shah. He's a warlord, right? All shahs and kings start off as warlords, and he steps in and starts the Pahlavi dynasty, which only goes for 2 generations. His son is the Shah we know so well. Uh, and this is a map of the time of Reza Shah. Here's Persia at that time. Um, and here's his son meeting with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Um, I wish I had a transcript of this meeting. He's a kind of a playboy. His first wife is an Egyptian princess. Uh, but the big event is in Iranian American history is 1953. A socialist uses the parliament, the Majlis that I was talking about, uh, and a socialist takes power. And what does the socialist want to do? He wants to kick out the British. And no more concessions. You guys took advantage of some weak shahs that we had, and we're not going to stand for it. And so they take to the streets. The British resist, and something terrible happens. There's a coup against the socialists, and popular supports for Mossadegh, 1953. This is Mossadegh at his trial. He's combative to the end. He's put under house arrest for the rest of his life. And who's behind the fall of Mossadegh? Yes, a familiar name that's an agent in the CIA, Kim Roosevelt. Roosevelt, wait a second. Kim Roosevelt was Teddy Roosevelt's grandson. And of course, having a grandfather like Teddy, why wouldn't you go into the CIA? During this uprising and this whole protest on the street, the Shah fled to Italy. He only came back after Mossadegh was thrown out in the CIA coup. And Iranians know this history. Remember, they had a majlis, they had a parliament. This was all debated. And he comes back. He gets rid of the first wife and gets another wife, Farah Diba. Here he is with a series of presidents, Ike, LBJ. We all support him, and most famously, Jimmy Carter. They're the best of friends, and that's why when Khomeini gets power, they want to do everything they can to embarrass Jimmy Carter. But I think we have to put this in context. And I'm going to next time, and I'll finish up for sure next week, but you have to understand what's going on in Iran in the context of what's going on in Israel. And we talked about the importance of Jerusalem. And in 1967, it's next year in Jerusalem has been a saying for a long time. And finally, in 1967, the Jews returned to Jerusalem. And that's where we'll start next time. Questions?
He got rid of his first wife because she didn't bear a son, right?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think that's right. Okay.
So
Wait,
which
I
was the
have a
the sh-
comment.
which was the Shah who came to the U.S. for medical treatment after he was overthrown in
That,
Persia?
that's the last one. Um, Pahlavi. It was Riza and Muhammad. Muhammad was the Shah that we knew. Yeah, Michael.
I am reminded of how today they claim is the day of maximum uh, attack on Iran and so on. And it makes me think of the Blitz when the Germans were trying to pound the English into submission. And the whole idea that you can somehow just bomb everything until there's nothing left and somehow call it a victory. Um, I just see people sort of rallying to whatever cause you may see here. It's just like you don't win a war by bombing people into submission. Look at Ukraine, the same kind of thing. This whole idea that we can avoid having boots on the ground and win a war with all this background that you just gave. Now we're just going to try to pound them into submission. And it may not be germane to the talk, but I just see it as a failure. You cannot win a war this way.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
I think we're all talking to the choir
Well, but it made me think of the Blitz and how it rallied the British. Of course, we came in to help, and we were helping with Lend-Lease and a lot of other ways. But the fact remains that it all it does is I think it solidifies the resistance to being conquered, and the the Trump and uh, all his people around him just think that the way you win a war is by bombing them back into the Stone Age. And even look at Vietnam when we sent B-52 bombers pounding North Vietnam. You know, Hegseth and his buddies think the way you win a war is you just keep bombing and bombing and bombing. And despite the fact that now oil prices have gone up, here's an example. Yet we drove down to Santa Barbara on Friday and stopped at the Santa Maria Costco to get gas. We drove back yesterday and stopped again at the Santa Maria Costco to get gas. The price from Friday to Monday had gone up almost 20 cents per gallon. And that's at Costco. And if you wanted to get premium, it was $5 and something a gallon. You know, sooner or later, people are going to start getting a little tired of some of this nonsense.
I'll just mention, I think I've mentioned my dentist is Persian, first generation. And he has cousins in Tehran. And they are rooting for the West and Israel. And the statistic I saw was 80-20, 80%, but before the war, 80, and at the time of the protests, 80% are tired of living in a theocracy. Um, uh, Iranians, particularly Iranian women, are not that religious.
Where's the where you said 80-20? Is there a follow-up statistic?
Right.
Yeah, who knows if it is what it is now. That was before. I don't think there's been a reliable poll in the last week.
Well, if you trying to take a poll amidst falling bombs, it's not easy.
It's not easy.
Although I did see there was a video of a great big gathering of people, I guess in Tehran, out in the open, thousands of people welcoming the new caliphate or whatever you want to call him,
Imam.
Iman, and it was like, wait a minute, they could have just bombed that area and killed about 10,000 people in one fell swoop. What, this was in Tehran, if I am correct. And so maybe they're sparing Tehran. I don't know what's going on, but I don't think, I just don't know their predictions that this is going to be over in a week, or now it's 2 weeks, that it's going to be over very soon, and they won't have to put people on the ground. And at this point, the only people who would be willing to put people on the ground, I believe, are the United States and Israel.
Well, I think Israel already has people on the ground. I think Mossad has had people on the ground for a long time.
Well, if they get found out, they're dead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Trump's call on the people of Iran to rise up is a kind of a cruel call, because when they rose up before this intervention, the regime showed itself willing to murder 30 to 45,000 of them. So I don't think they're going to see them rise up. The only way they could rise up is if there is support from a trained military force to take on the Revolutionary Guard. I don't see that happening. This is going to just end badly all around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a safe bet. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, we'll see. So next week will be the last week and we're going to take 6 weeks off. We're going to Spain, and celebrating our 60th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And
Will you be going to Cordoba?
we will.
Yes.
Oh, it's
It
just
does-
wonderful, wonderful visit.
Yeah. All right, but we'll finish up next week, and in that 6 week period, the study group could study other things. So I'm just saying. All right.
All right. Thanks a lot.
See you
Thanks.
next week.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Have a good week.